Ryan Wyatt, and today I'm joined by fellow wealth advisor here at the firm, Nick Lewandowski. Nick, how you doing?
I am doing very well, thank you.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. I'm going to paint the picture, the topic that we're going to cover today. Just say you wake up one day, you realize retirement's maybe not as far off as you thought. Maybe it's even right in front of you, and you feel like you've done some things. You're wondering, have I done enough? Am I behind? Have I saved enough? Did I start late? How is that going to impact me in retirement, etc.? The strategy that we're going to talk about today is going to be relevant to you if you do have any of those concerns. And so there have been some rule changes recently that open up the opportunity for people. Granted, it's a small window of opportunity, but it opens up a window of opportunity for people to save more for retirement than traditional contribution limits have allowed them. So the focus of today's episode is going to be around the new changes to retirement plan contribution limits. Those are called super catch-up contribution limits. Before we discuss the changes in depth, Nick, I was hoping that you could walk us through just some of the basics. How do retirement plan contributions work? What are the limits, et cetera?
So when you have a workplace retirement plan, it's usually going to be something like a 401k, a 403b, or a 457 plan. There are limitations, as you've said repeatedly, contribution limits that apply. These contribution limits apply to what are called your elective deferrals. So what you as the employee set aside from your pay into the plan. There are also limits that apply on what the employer can provide on the employer side. This conversation today that we have only pertains to limits on the employee side. We're not touching the employer side of things in this conversation today. But the limits are pretty straightforward. They increase periodically because they account for inflation, but there's not a ton of flexibility within these limits, as you were talking about before. So for everyone in a plan who is a member of a plan, regardless of your age, for 2026, the maximum you can defer from your pay into the plan for the year is $24,500. There is something called a catch-up provision for those a little closer to retirement at age 50 plus that allows you to put in another $8,000 maximum on top of that. So if you're under 50, maximum $24,500 for 2026 under the old rules. If you're over 50, maximum $32,500 for 2026 under the old rules. Catch-up contributions help, but still a lot of people find themselves in the position where they're, they kind of finally made it, so to speak, or they're finally making really good money at this point in their career, and they finally can save a lot more. And it's like, oh man, I'm stopped out with this limit, which is the issue that you were talking about a few minutes ago.
Right. And you said it several times, but the emphasis needs placed on old rules, because in a minute here, we're going to explain some of the changes that went into effect on January 1st of 2026. But, what people commonly think is, I have a good earning, I have savings potential in my later stages in my career. Again, how do I make up for lost time, or how do I just simply put more money away for retirement so I can live the lifestyle that I want to? And that's introduce what's changed, which is the new super catch-up rule. So, Nick, before we talk about the super catch-up rule, I know when this rule was introduced and it came out in stages. So could you just kind of take a step back and paint that picture of what's happened in the past and brought us to where we are today with these new rules?
December of 2022, Congress passed something called the Secure 2.0 Act. In our world of financial and retirement planning, this legislation was a huge deal. There was a lot in there that adjusted rules and made rules more complicated was part of it. One of the things about this legislation that is interesting is there were a number of provisions that were in the law that was passed in 2022 that didn't go into effect until later years. And this super catch-up that we're about to talk about in more detail was one of them. It actually went into effect at the beginning of last year, January 1st of 2025. And what did that change? Well, starting in 2025, it created this brief window, as you've already alluded to, that is between age 60 through 63 for someone who still has access to a workplace retirement plan, where they can make a larger catch-up contribution to their workplace retirement plan than we talked about under the old rules a moment ago. That larger contribution is where the super catch-up contribution thing comes from there. So the under the new rules, there's that $24,000 500 maximum that we talked about that applies to everyone regardless of their age. If you're over 50, you can then do the additional $8,000 catch-up. And then if you're in this window from 60 to 63, you can do another $3,250 on top of the traditional catch-up, which makes the total catch-up with the super catch-up $11,250, which means that if you're in that 60 to 63 window where that the super catch-up applies, your maximum contribution in 2026 that you can make from your pay is now $35,750.
Right. And I would say why this is impactful. If you think about that age range of 60 to 63, now granted, this isn't going to be kind of like a one size fits all, more speaking generalities here, but often that's going to be later in your career. So it's more likely that those are your, peak earning years. So you have the ability to save more. More often than not, kids are out of the house. So you can assume maybe expenses are lower than they were in previous years. Again, allowing you to save more. And if your mortgage isn't gone, well, it's likely a lot smaller than where you started out years ago. So again, more savings potential. The one thing that I want to stress here is that this is not a loophole. This is policy change. And this is really just a strategy to take advantage of policy change. What I want,
and there's one more twist I want to mention real quick that I didn't cover in my previous summary. If this is retirement plan contribution rule, so it can't be simple, right? And there's got to be another twist. So the other twist is if you're a high earner, according to this rule, and the definition for that is if you earn more than $145,000, starting in 2026, the catch-up, whether it's regular catch-up that we talked about or the super catch-up, has to go in as a Roth contribution after tax. It cannot go in as a pre-tax contribution. So you can do the catch-up or super catch-up even if you're over that $145,000 amount, but if you're over that amount, you can't make that catch-up or super catch-up on a pre-tax basis.
Correct. And so a couple additional notes. I'm glad that you brought that up, Nick. So one, there is some confusion here. Over the last week alone, I've been asked about this super catch-up rule 3 different times. One from an accountant, actually. But the important note worth making is that not every employer, this isn't a mandatory thing that employers need to do. So not every employer is going to be, set up to handle the super catch-up contribution. We're very comfortable reviewing our clients' benefits and figuring out whether this option's available for them or not. So that's something we're happy to guide you through determining eligibility and whether the company has that feature available. Additionally, employer is not set up or does not allow the super catch-up contribution. I think the next logical question that would come up is, hey, can that super catch-up contribution go to an IRA? And unfortunately, the answer to that is no. So what I wanted to do, Nick, next is just before we start to close things out, if we could just bring home how, determining whether super catch-up contributions make sense for a client or not ties into like their overall plan while they're working and then into retirement. When I think of this, I start to think tax planning. Hey, does it make sense to start building up a Roth bucket ahead of time? No mandatory distributions, but if you could shed some light on that, I'd appreciate it.
Let's say you're eligible for this. So you're in the 60, 63 range. Your employer allows the provision in the plan. Like you said, Ryan, the next question is, if I have a choice, if I'm under that income limit, does it make sense to do pre-tax or Roth contributions? And the high level of this that we look at for clients is we're looking at what is your tax picture? What tax bracket do you fall into now? And over the life of your projected future financial plan, what tax bracket or brackets are you likely to fall into in the future? And the simplest way of summarizing this is if you're in a very high tax bracket in your peak, higher, I shouldn't say very high because of the income thing, but if you're in a higher tax bracket now in your earning years than you're likely to be later in retirement, pre-tax is generally better to do on the upfront because you'll get a tax deduction in your high earning years and your tax rate is likely to be lower when the money comes out on the back end in the future. If the situation's reversed, if you expect to be in a lower tax bracket now than in future later in retirement, then Roth can make a lot more sense because it's just reversed in that case, right? You pay taxes now at the low rate, the money goes into the Roth account, and then it comes out of the Roth tax-free when you would have potentially higher tax bracket in retirement. There's a lot of analysis that goes into determining that, but that's the simple idea of what we're trying to get at with the planning.
Schedule your complimentary review with Ryan and his team today. Just visit them online at wyzewealthadvisors.com or call 724-271-7019 to get started. That's 724-271-7019 to get started.
Exactly. For our clients that are retired, I would say most people want to maximize tax savings over their lifetime, and that's an area that we're very comfortable guiding them through. But what we look to do is we look to flatten out their tax bracket, especially when they're retired, as best or as much as possible. And so what that really means is if we project your retirement income over, let's say, 30 years, and early in retirement, you're in a very low tax bracket, but later in retirement, when you have mandatory distributions from IRAs coming out, in addition to other income, you're in a very high tax bracket. What we would look to do is shift some of the income that we believe is going to be taxed at a high bracket in the future to those lower income years. The end result is that your tax picture no longer looks like a seesaw, low in certain years, high in future years, or vice versa, high now and low later. It's flat or tax bracket equilibrium. We can actually start that planning for clients before they even retire. And this tool or the analysis that we're talking about would be the way that we go about that. What does the future income look like? Where should we put the money today to best manage or make that tax picture as efficient as possible?
And I would add to what you're saying about even before people retire, just to say that for those in the audience, people will often say, well, I'm so far from retirement, it's so hard to project, why even go through the exercise? And I'm here to tell you that the earlier you start, the more powerful it becomes because you can get a plan in place early, and you would be shocked at what these numbers potentially compound out to if you go through the effort to try and put some projection together early. So I want to do a little teaser for the younger folks who are a little more pre-retirement out there, that just because retirement's far away doesn't mean you shouldn't start thinking about this, because you may really be able to set yourself up well from a tax standpoint if you start a little early.
I think you and I can speak from experience. I know a lot of conversations we have in the office between the two of us is this exact topic, is just making sure that things are in the correct bucket so we don't have a future tax problem.
That's right.
Sometimes that's a very good thing. That means you're saving, but if you can kind of optimize things as early on, then when you get to retirement, you really have a lot of flexibility in terms of what kind of tax bucket you pull from to meet your spending needs.
Exactly. Yeah.
The last thing that I wanted to cover here really quick. So what does what's at stake if you do this well versus if maybe it makes sense to take advantage of the super catch up but you don't? What's at stake on both ends?
The thing that probably jumps out at anyone who learns about this rule is like, you don't have very long to do it. You have 4 years, to take advantage of this super catch up, and then it's gone. It's very fleeting opportunity. So one thing is just that like you have to know about it, and you have to know if it applies, and you have to do it, because you don't really get an opportunity. Like, the ship sails very quickly on the super catch up under the rules. And the bigger thing related to that, I think a lot of people in the audience probably listen and they're like, well, it's really only $3,000 more of catch up in each year. Does it really make a difference to my retirement on that number? And if you think about it that way, from that perspective, the answer is like, well, no, it doesn't. But the important thing to think about this is not just in the year you make the contribution. You need to think about that if you make that contribution when you're 60 and that money compounds invested over the next 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, depending on life expectancy years, particularly when you start thinking about Roth contributions that grow tax-free and can be withdrawn tax-free, that money can compound out to a much more substantial sum over a full retirement time horizon. And that's where the real stakes lie, is you have this window to get more money working and adjust your tax plan with a little more flexibility that you only get one quick look at, but can have a decent sized impact when you think about the long-term compound growth of it. So it gives you a little more flexibility. Maybe it gives you a little more sense of control, like you were talking about at the beginning, Ryan, with waking up in the morning and being like, did I do enough? Is there anything else I can be doing? This is something that you can take advantage of, that kind of puts more power into your hands, so to speak, from a proactive standpoint. And just to touch back on the tax planning point that we made a second ago, having these different buckets of money and using advantages to get money into these different buckets under the law, it really is what provides us as planners with more levers to pull in retirement for managing tax and income for long-term planning purposes. And in an ideal world, everyone has some Roth money, everyone has some pre-tax money, everyone has some taxable money. It gives you maximum flexibility. And this provision, using it properly based on your circumstances, can be a way of helping enhance that or achieve that.
Yeah, and I like what you said. If you take 4 years, $3,000 worth of super catch-up contributions, in today's dollars, that's a $12,000 decision. But if you look at that $12,000 decision today compounded over, like you said, could be 30 years, that's a much bigger decision than just $12,000 today, strictly because of compounding. And so what I would say, just to close us out here is, we hope you found this informative. For our clients, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We know that a lot of our clients are still working and likely have this opportunity available to them. We're happy to put it into your plan and show you the results or the benefits that it would provide you. If you know anybody that falls into this category or has been asking questions about it and you think would benefit from listening to this, please do not hesitate to share this episode with them. And for our prospective clients that are listening to this episode, we've been helping our clients retire on their own terms for 30 plus years now. So if you like what you heard in this episode and you want to have a conversation and feel like you're in control of retirement, retiring confidently, please do not hesitate to reach out. We hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.
This episode's content is for informational purposes only. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Wyze Wealth Advisors, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to other parties' informational accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with an advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation.